As the night settles into its deepest stillness, let us move gently away from the present moment and toward a quieter way of remembering. This is not a story meant to be hurried, nor one that demands attention. It is a story to be rested within, like a familiar room lit by a single candle, where shadows move slowly and nothing asks more of you than to listen. Allow the sounds of the day to fade, replaced by the softer rhythms of breath and imagination. Tonight, we walk backward into a century-long asleep, to a time when history did not yet know it was being made, and when England stood calmly on the edge of transformation without sensing the ground beneath it beginning to shift. The year is 1066, and England remains firmly rooted in the Anglo-Saxon world. Life unfolds according to patterns worn smooth by generations. Wooden halls stand darkened by age and smoke, their beams shaped by careful hands rather than ambition. Fields stretch outward beneath gray skies, divided by hedges that mark not conquest, but patience. The people of the land know their seasons, their saints, and their kings, and trust that tomorrow will resemble yesterday closely enough to feel safe. Beyond the villages, the sea lies constant and familiar, a boundary more symbolic than threatening. Few imagine it as a road, fewer still imagine that it is already being crossed. Across that narrow body of water, Normandy waits. Shaped by wind, discipline, and iron, it is a land accustomed to preparation rather than comfort. Here, the sea is not merely observed, but studied. Ships are built with purpose, not decoration. Men are raised to expect struggle, to accept command, and to endure uncertainty. At the center of this quiet readiness stands William, Duke of Normandy, not yet known by the title history will grant him. His life has been one of constant proving, of learning restraint as carefully as force. Around him gather men who trust not his promises, but his steadiness. They prepare without celebration, aware that destiny rarely announces itself loudly. The night before departure carries no sense of triumph. Armor is checked in silence, horses shift patiently, priests murmur blessings meant more to steady hearts than to secure victory. William walks among his men with measured calm, neither inspiring fear nor excitement, but something more durable, confidence. He understands that conquest begins long before battle, formed quietly in moments of discipline and resolve. When the ships finally push away from shore, there is no cheer, only the sound of wood against water and the slow surrender of land to distance as the channel opens before them. As the fleet moves beneath the moon, England sleeps. Villages remain dark, fields unmoving, unaware that their familiar world has already begun to loosen. No arrows have flown, no blood has been shed, and yet something irreversible has started. Let this moment remain with you, suspended between intention and action, where silence carries more weight than noise. History, at its most powerful, often begins this way, quietly, gently, like a shadow crossing the sky before the storm is ever seen.
Morning reaches the southern coast of England slowly, with no urgency in its light. A pale glow filters through drifting mist, touching water and sand with equal softness. Fishermen step into the shallows as they have countless times before, their movements guided by habit rather than thought. Villages stir beneath low roofs, smoke rising lazily as fires are coaxed back to life. Birds trace familiar paths above the shore, indifferent to meaning or memory. Nothing in this hour feels unusual. The land trusts the morning, confident that it will pass as all mornings do, without disruption or demand. Out beyond the mist, shapes begin to form upon the water. At first, they appear like shadows mistaken for clouds, dark and indistinct. Slowly, patiently, they resolve into ships. Sails catch the light, unfolding like great wings held steady by purpose. The sea offers no resistance, carrying the fleet forward with calm indifference. Oars move in rhythm, ropes tighten, anchors prepare to fall. This arrival is neither rushed nor chaotic. It is deliberate, measured, shaped by long anticipation. The shore does not greet them. It does not retreat either. It simply waits. William steps onto English soil without ceremony. There is no dramatic claim, no raised voice carried by wind. His presence alone is declaration enough. Around him, his men move with practiced discipline, forming lines, guiding horses, adjusting armor with quiet efficiency. This is not the energy of men seeking glory. It is the calm of those who expect resistance and are prepared to meet it without haste. William observes the land carefully, already imagining its roads, its strongholds, its future reshaped in stone rather than wood. He does not rush. Time, he believes, will bend in his favor. Far from the coast, word begins its slow journey inland. Messengers ride roads shaped by centuries of travel, carrying news that feels heavy even before it is fully understood. Harold Godwinson, newly crowned King of England, receives the message with a stillness born of exhaustion. His reign has barely begun, yet it has already demanded everything of him. Battles fought, loyalties tested, the weight of kingship settling heavily upon his shoulders. Now, another challenge rises. He listens carefully, knowing that haste can undo even the strongest position. England is his land, and he trusts its people, its terrain, and its traditions. Between these two men, the countryside remains unchanged. Fields stretch beneath watchful skies, forests stand unmoved, hills offer no allegiance. Armies begin to move, not yet toward battle, but toward inevitability. Each step brings the worlds closer, drawn together like tides guided by the same unseen force. There is still silence enough to breathe, still space enough for uncertainty. Let this moment rest gently with you, this calm before collision, where nothing has yet been decided, and history waits patiently, balanced between the world that has been and the one quietly taking shape. As the days begin to move forward, England itself seems to stretch, as though waking from a dream it is not yet ready to leave. Roads that have known centuries of quiet travel now feel the steady rhythm of marching feet. Men gather not with excitement, but with duty, leaving behind fields, homes, and familiar routines. Armor is worn not for ceremony, but for necessity. Shields bear marks of age rather than ornament, and weapons are carried with a calm understanding of their purpose. This is not the energy of conquest, but of defense, shaped by familiarity with the land and a belief that what is known is worth protecting. Harold Godwinson leads his forces southward with a measured pace that reflects both urgency and restraint. He understands the cost of haste, having already spent strength securing his crown against northern threats. His army is composed not only of trained warriors, but of men drawn from the land itself, bound by obligation rather than ambition. They march through villages that offer quiet support, food placed carefully into hands, blessings whispered without ceremony. There is trust here, woven through shared memory and tradition. Harold carries this trust heavily, aware that every decision now echoes far beyond himself. Meanwhile, William does not rush inland. He allows his army to settle, to breathe, to organize itself within English soil. Temporary camps rise with methodical precision, each movement calculated rather than impulsive. Supplies are secured, lines established, and the land is observed with careful eyes. William understands that patience unsettles an opponent more deeply than speed. His men do not wander or boast, they wait. This waiting is not uncertainty, but confidence practiced over years of discipline. Hastings, though still distant, begins to take shape not as a place, but as an inevitability.
The countryside between them watches silently as two intentions move closer together. Hills roll gently beneath skies that offer no sign, no prophecy. Forests absorb the sound of marching feet, keeping secrets without effort. Rivers are crossed without ceremony, their waters flowing unchanged by the passage of men. Time feels suspended here, stretched thin between anticipation and restraint. Farmers pause in their work to observe columns of soldiers passing by, unsure whether to fear or trust what they see. Life continues carefully, as though hoping stillness might soften what approaches. As night falls along the roads to Hastings, fires are lit sparingly, their glow held low against the dark. Men rest not in comfort, but in quiet reflection, wrapped in cloaks and thoughts they do not share. Somewhere ahead, destiny waits without emotion or intention, shaped only by the steps taken toward it. For now, there is no clash, no cry, no arrow darkening the sky. Only distance narrowing, resolve steadying, and history drawing itself inward, preparing to speak through movement rather than words.
Night settles over the land near Hastings with a heaviness that feels deliberate, as though darkness itself has chosen to linger. The sky holds no stars at first, only layers of cloud drifting slowly, dimming what little moonlight tries to pass through. The ground cools beneath still air, and the countryside grows quiet in a way that feels deeper than ordinary rest. This is not the silence of peace, but of waiting. Men on both sides sense it without naming it, lying awake beneath cloaks, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a place that will soon be remembered for reasons none of them can yet fully grasp. In the English camp, fires burn low and carefully tended. Harold's men gather close to their warmth, not for conversation, but for reassurance. Some sharpen blades out of habit rather than need, letting the soft scrape of metal steady their thoughts. Others sit with heads bowed, lips moving in quiet prayer, recalling saints and stories passed down through childhood. Harold moves among them without ceremony, his presence calm, his words few. He understands that courage does not always come from speeches, but from shared stillness. These men fight not for glory, but for home, for fields and families that exist beyond this darkened slope. Across the field, the Norman camp holds a different rhythm, shaped by discipline rather than familiarity. William's men prepare with quiet efficiency, guided by routines learned over many campaigns. Armor is laid out neatly, straps checked and rechecked, movements economical and unhurried. Priests walk softly among the tents, offering blessings that feel practiced yet sincere. William himself withdraws from the noise, spending time in reflection rather than command. He knows that tomorrow will test more than strength. It will test resolve, cohesion, and the ability to remain steady when the world begins to break apart. Between the two camps lies the field itself, dark and undisturbed, its grass moving gently with the night air. It holds no allegiance, no memory of what is coming. Insects move through it unaware, and the earth rests as it always has, indifferent to banners and claims. This space, so quiet now, feels stretched thin by anticipation. It is neither English nor Norman in this moment, belonging instead to time itself. Soon it will be marked, shaped by countless feet and fallen bodies, but for now, it remains untouched. As the night deepens, sleep comes unevenly. Dreams are brief and restless, filled with fragments rather than stories. Somewhere, a bell rings faintly, carried by distance and wind, reminding those who hear it of order and faith. The hours pass slowly, measured not by clocks, but by breath and heartbeat. Dawn approaches without haste, carrying with it a future no one present can yet see.
Until then, the world holds its breath, suspended in darkness, waiting for the field to wake.
Dawn arrives over the field near Hastings without gentleness, pressing pale light through thinning clouds and lifting the darkness in slow, deliberate layers. Mist clings to the grass, dampening the ground beneath countless waiting feet, while the air carries a chill that sharpens breath and thought alike. Men rise quietly, stretching stiff limbs, fastening armor made heavy by night moisture. There is no sudden rush, no single signal that declares the beginning. Instead, the world seems to ease itself toward movement, as if the land itself senses that stillness can no longer be sustained. The field awakens not with sound, but with tension, stretched thin between two forces that now face one another across open ground. The English line forms first, drawn up along the higher slope, shields lifting into place with practiced familiarity. The shield wall stands close and tight, wood pressed to wood, iron rims touching, creating a living barrier shaped by generations of warfare. Men adjust their footing carefully, aware of the uneven ground beneath them, feeling the weight of their neighbors at either side. Harold stands among them, visible not by ornament, but by calm. He offers no grand command, only quiet presence. The strength of this line lies not in ambition, but in endurance, in the belief that holding firm is sometimes enough. Below them, the Norman forces assemble with deliberate order. Cavalry shifts restlessly, horses sensing the charge before it is given. Archers step forward, bows already strung, fingers testing tension with familiar ease. William moves along the ranks, his voice carried calmly, reminding his men of patience and purpose. He understands that this battle will not be decided in a single rush. It will unfold in stages, shaped by timing as much as force. The ground between the armies feels vast now, stretched wide by the weight of expectation, as though reluctant to close the distance too quickly. The first arrows rise almost gently, lifting into the sky in dark, curving paths. For a brief moment, they seem suspended, silent against the pale morning light. Then they fall. Shields absorb the sound with dull thuds, wood shuddering but holding. Some arrows glance away, others embed themselves deeply, quivering as if uncertain what they have struck. The sky, having released its first cry, returns to stillness once more. Men breathe, adjust, remain standing. This is not yet chaos, but testing, a careful probing of strength and resolve. As the volleys continue, rhythm begins to form, a steady exchange that feels almost ritualistic. The field responds with echoes, sound carrying outward and then fading back into the open air. No side advances fully. Both observe, measure, endure. In this moment, history does not yet choose its direction. It waits, watching as men hold their ground beneath a sky that has begun to speak, knowing that what has started cannot now be undone. As the morning stretches onward, the field begins to lose its early stillness, replacing it with a restless motion that moves back and forth like a slow tide. The air grows heavier with sound, not yet overwhelming, but persistent enough to settle into the body. Arrows continue to rise and fall, their paths now more familiar, their presence less startling, yet no less dangerous. The English shield wall remains steady upon the higher ground, absorbing the rhythm of attack with a patience born of long tradition. Each impact sends a tremor through wood and arm alike, but the line holds, breathing together, standing as one living structure shaped by discipline rather than fear. From below, the Normans begin to test more than distance. Infantry advance cautiously, shields lifted, steps measured to the uneven ground. They move not with reckless force, but with intention, probing the strength of the wall above them. The climb is slow, each step demanding effort,
each breath drawn sharply against the incline. As they approach, the sounds of battle sharpen, metal striking metal, voices calling out warnings or encouragement, the dull weight of bodies colliding. Yet even here, there is restraint. William watches closely, observing how the English line responds, noting where it bends and where it remains firm. The first close engagements unfold without spectacle. Swords meet shields, spears thrust and withdraw, and men press forward only to be pushed back again. The shield wall proves stubborn, absorbing impact after impact, refusing to open. English fighters brace themselves behind overlapping boards, their strength drawn not from individual prowess, but from unity. When one stumbles, another steps closer. When one tires, the line tightens. This is not a dance of heroes, but of endurance, shaped by repetition and trust. The slope itself seems to favor them, granting weight and gravity to their defense. William responds with patience rather than frustration. He understands that walls are not broken by force alone, but by movement and timing. Orders pass quietly through the Norman ranks, and formations adjust almost imperceptibly. Archers reposition, infantry withdraw slightly, then press again from new angles. The battle breathes in and out, advancing and retreating without surrendering control. This measured approach unsettles more than a reckless charge might have. It suggests that the pressure will not cease, that the wall will be tested again and again until fatigue speaks louder than resolve. As the sun climbs higher, the field begins to bear the marks of struggle. Grass is flattened, earth churned, and the air carries the scent of exertion and iron. Yet still, the shield wall stands. In this moment, it feels as though the outcome might rest entirely upon its refusal to yield. Time stretches, movements repeat, and the clash settles into a relentless rhythm. History watches quietly, neither impressed nor moved, allowing the contest to unfold at its own pace, waiting to see which will falter first, the patience of the attackers or the strength of the wall that refuses to break. As the hours pass and the weight of battle settles deeper into muscle and breath, the rhythm on the field begins to change in subtle ways. What once felt steady now carries hesitation, brief pauses where there were none before. The English shield wall remains upright, but strain has begun to thread itself through its unity. Arms ache from holding shields aloft, legs tire from bracing against repeated impact, and the mind grows heavy from constant alertness. Still, the line holds. From above, the defenders look down upon the Norman forces with guarded confidence, believing that endurance alone may yet see them through this long and grinding day. Below the slope, movement ripples through the Norman ranks. Orders pass quietly, carried by gesture rather than voice, and formations begin to shift with deliberate care. Some units pull back slightly, their withdrawal measured and controlled. To watching eyes above, this retreat appears uneven, almost uncertain. The pressure eases, if only briefly. The sudden space feels unfamiliar, unsettling in its quiet. For men who have stood firm against relentless advance, the absence of force suggests possibility. The field seems to open, inviting movement rather than resistance. Along the English line, murmurs begin to spread. Confidence, long held in check, stirs cautiously. The sight of Norman troops falling back feels like confirmation, proof that the wall has done its work. Some warriors shift their footing forward, eager to press advantage, to turn defense into pursuit. Harold's commands urge restraint, but battle rarely listens carefully. Small groups begin to move, shields loosening, formations stretching thin as individuals step beyond the protection of the whole. What begins as curiosity grows into momentum, and the slope that once favored defense now draws men downward. The Norman retreat slows, then steadies. Those who withdraw do not flee.
They turn, regrouping with practiced ease, their movements revealing intention rather than panic. Cavalry pivots, infantry reforms, and suddenly the space between the forces feels different, no longer open but exposed. William's plan unfolds quietly, without flourish. The feigned retreat, an art learned through experience, has done its work. Discipline answers impulse, and the Norman lines prepare to close again upon those who have stepped too far. As the trap tightens, the field shifts in character. The slope that offered safety now complicates return, and scattered English fighters find themselves isolated from the strength of the wall behind them. Confusion replaces confidence, and the sounds of battle sharpen, rising above the steady rhythm that once prevailed. In this moment, history tilts gently, not through sudden collapse, but through subtle misstep. The lesson is an old one, whispered through centuries of conflict, that endurance must be paired with patience, and that the most dangerous moments often arrive disguised as relief.
The field no longer feels wide or distant, but close and crowded, as though the space itself has tightened around the men who move within it. Where order once defined the English defense, uneven gaps now appear, small at first, then slowly widening as fatigue and confusion take hold. The shield wall still exists, but it no longer breathes as one body. Some shields remain locked together with stubborn resolve, while others have shifted or broken away, carried downhill by momentum that cannot easily be reversed. Voices rise in urgency, calling out warnings, names, commands that overlap and fade into one another. The calm endurance that held firm through the morning begins to thin, stretched by the cost of holding ground for so long. Norman forces respond quickly to this change, their movements sharpening as opportunity reveals itself. Cavalry presses forward with renewed purpose, hooves striking churned earth that offers less resistance than before. Infantry advances with tighter formation, closing spaces that moments earlier felt open. William's strategy reveals its depth here, not through sudden aggression, but through coordination. Each movement supports the next, turning scattered advantage into steady pressure. The Normans do not rush blindly uphill. Instead, they flow into weaknesses, allowing discipline to shape momentum. The field becomes less a place of standoff and more a shifting pattern of advance and response. Among the English ranks, the effort to restore order begins immediately, driven by instinct and loyalty rather than command alone. Men shout to one another, urging shields back into place, calling for those who have gone too far to return. Some manage to climb back toward the line, breathless and strained, while others find themselves cut off, surrounded by motion they cannot fully read. The slope that once favored defense now complicates every step, turning retreat into labor and advance into risk. Courage remains, but it is now tested individually rather than shared across the wall. Above the field, arrows once again darken the sky, their paths adjusted to meet changing positions below. They fall not in great sweeping volleys, but with measured intent, pressing down upon those whose focus is already divided. Shields lift unevenly, some too late, others too soon. The sound of impact blends with shouts and the clash of steel, creating a constant presence rather than sudden shock. The sky seems indifferent, releasing its burden and then returning to silence, as though watching without judgment the unfolding struggle beneath it. As the day wears on, the ground itself tells the story. Grass disappears beneath trampling feet, earth turns soft and dark, and familiar landmarks vanish into movement and noise. The battle no longer feels contained within lines or plans. It has become fluid, shaped by exhaustion as much as intent. Yet within this shifting chaos, purpose still guides action. History does not move in a single direction here, but through many small decisions, each one quietly pulling the future closer. The field continues to change, and with it, the fate of a kingdom slowly comes into view. As the afternoon light shifts, the sky above Hastings seems to lower, clouds thickening, as though drawn closer by the sound and weight of what unfolds beneath them. The air grows warmer, heavier.
carrying with it the scent of churned earth and exertion. Fatigue settles deeply into bodies that have been standing, lifting, bracing for hours without true rest. Movements slow, not from lack of will, but from the quiet insistence of tired muscle and dulled breath. The field no longer feels like a place where plans are executed cleanly. It feels lived in, worn down, shaped moment by those who remain standing and those who no longer do. Norman archers step forward once more, adjusting their stance with care learned through repetition rather than urgency. They lift their bows higher than before, angling their shots not toward shields, but toward the open space above them. William has watched closely, learning from earlier failures, understanding that force must sometimes travel a longer path to find its mark. When the arrows rise this time, they arc steeply, climbing into the sky until they seem almost weightless, briefly detached from intention. For a heartbeat, they hang there, suspended against cloud and light, silent and waiting. Below, the English line senses change without fully understanding it. Shields remain lifted, but not all eyes are forward now. Some glance upward, tracking the movement overhead, while others remain focused on what presses before them. The arrows descend not in a single unified fall, but in scattered paths, unpredictable and difficult to read. Some strike shields, some find earth, and some pass through open space untouched. And then, in the midst of this uncertain rain, one arrow finds its way through the confusion, its path unremarkable until it is not. Harold Godwinson stands among his men as he has throughout the day, visible not through ornament, but through presence. He has remained steady, absorbing the strain of command with the same endurance he asks of those around him. When the arrow strikes, there is no grand moment, no immediate clarity, only a sudden disruption, a break in continuity. Those nearest him turn instinctively, sensing change before they see it. The king falters, and in that faltering, something deeper shifts. Leadership, once anchored, begins to drift. News spreads not through words, but through movement. The English line reacts unevenly, some pressing forward in defiance, others hesitating as uncertainty takes hold. Confidence, already strained, begins to fracture. The arrow itself becomes more than a weapon. It becomes a symbol, carried forward by memory and retelling, marking the moment when the sky itself seemed to intervene. Whether fate or chance, the effect is the same. Balance gives way to motion, and history, long suspended, begins to fall decisively toward one side. The field responds to the change almost before it is understood, as though the ground itself senses a shift in balance. Sound continues, the clash of metal, the rhythm of breath, the movement of feet, yet something essential has quieted. The English line no longer feels anchored in the same way. Men glance toward where Harold stood, searching not only for a figure, but for certainty. Fatigue deepens into doubt, and doubt spreads more quickly than fear ever could. The afternoon light presses down through broken clouds, illuminating a field that now feels unsteady, its earlier order softened by uncertainty and loss. Around the fallen king, confusion takes shape. Those closest move instinctively, shields lifting, bodies closing in, attempting to protect what cannot be restored. Others push forward, driven by resolve rather than clarity, believing that momentum alone might carry them through. But without the quiet center that held them, movements lose cohesion. Commands overlap or go unheard, swallowed by the noise of battle. The shield wall, once a shared effort, becomes a series of individual struggles, each man bracing not only against the enemy, but against the growing weight of isolation. The Normans sense the change with practiced awareness. This is not triumph yet, but opportunity, recognized through years of experience rather than excitement. William's presence becomes more visible, moving along the line with renewed purpose, reinforcing discipline rather than urging haste. Cavalry presses forward again, not in reckless charge, but in coordinated advance, exploiting openings that now resist closure. Infantry follows with measured steps, their confidence rooted in structure rather than emotion. What was once resistance now begins to yield, not suddenly, but steadily, like a door opening under sustained pressure. The field bears witness to this transformation without commentary. Bodies move, fall, rise again, then fall once more. The earth accepts each imprint without distinction, indifferent to rank or name. The sky remains unchanged, clouds drifting slowly, as though unaware of the weight carried below. Time feels stretched here, moments blurring together as effort replaces intention. For those within it, the battle is no longer about claim or defense. It has narrowed to survival, to endurance, to the instinct to remain standing a moment longer. As the English resistance thins, the shape of the day becomes clearer. This is not collapse in an instant, but dissolution over time. The crown, once held through presence and trust, has fallen silent, and in its silence, space opens for a new order to take hold. History does not rush to declare its outcome. It allows the field to finish its work, knowing that what remains will speak loudly enough once the noise finally fades. As the afternoon begins its slow descent toward evening, the battle loses what little symmetry it once possessed. The field no longer holds two opposing forms, but a shifting mass of motion and sound, spreading unevenly across ground that has been worn soft by hours of struggle. Where lines once stood, clusters now move and dissolve, forming briefly before scattering again. The air feels thick, heavy with breath and effort, and each movement seems to require more will than the last. Time stretches strangely here, moments lengthening as exhaustion deepens, making it difficult to sense how much of the day remains. Among the English forces, resistance continues, but it has changed in nature. What was once collective strength has become individual resolve. Small groups hold together where they can, forming pockets of defense amid growing disorder. They fight not because they believe victory is still possible, but because stopping feels impossible. Familiar faces are harder to find, and commands are replaced by instinct. The land they know so well now feels altered, its slopes and paths unfamiliar beneath the pressure of retreat and pursuit. Even so, there is dignity in their persistence, a quiet refusal to surrender easily what has defined them for generations. The Norman advance presses forward with increasing certainty. Cavalry moves through openings that widen with each passing moment, while infantry follows, steady and relentless. This is not chaos on their side, but controlled momentum, shaped by discipline and reinforced by belief in outcome. William's strategy has reached its final phase, not marked by celebration, but by continuation. Orders still pass calmly, formations adjust as needed, and attention remains focused. Victory, for William, is not an emotional release, but a responsibility unfolding step by step. Across the field, signs of the battle's toll become unmistakable. The ground is deeply scarred, grass flattened into darkened paths, earth marked by countless impressions. Weapons lie abandoned where hands could no longer hold them. The soundscape changes as well, growing less sharp, more uneven, punctuated by gaps where noise once dominated. Even the wind seems to move more carefully, carrying fragments of sound rather than full voices. The field begins to feel emptied, as though the struggle itself is slowly withdrawing. As daylight fades, what remains of the English resistance gives way, not all at once, but in stages. Some retreat toward the woods, others towards familiar roads, seeking distance rather than safety. The battle, having reached its conclusion, does not announce itself, it simply quiets. In this gradual settling, the day completes its work. The world does not yet understand what has been decided here,
but the field knows. And as evening approaches, history begins, quietly, to move on.
Evening settles gently over the land where the battle has spent itself, arriving not with ceremony, but with a slow dimming of light that softens everything it touches. The field near Hastings, so restless only hours before, begins to grow still. Sounds linger briefly, the distant call of voices, the uneven steps of those still moving, and then fade into a broader hush. Smoke drifts upward from scattered fires, thinning as it rises, while the sky takes on the muted colors of a day releasing its final breath. The earth, churned and marked, rests again, holding what it has been given without judgment or memory. Those who remain on the field move carefully now, their actions shaped by fatigue rather than urgency. Some search quietly for companions, calling names that may or may not be answered. Others tend to wounds with practiced hands, using what little remains close at hand. The urgency of battle has passed, replaced by a slower, heavier awareness of consequence. Armor is loosened, weapons lowered, and the body begins to register what the mind has held at bay. Pain arrives not as a shock, but as a gradual presence, settling into muscles and joints as the need for action fades. William walks the field with measured steps, observing without triumph. Victory has come, but it carries weight rather than relief. He understands that what has been gained must now be held, shaped, and justified. Around him, his men gather themselves, tending to the practical matters that follow every conflict. There is no celebration yet, no release of tension into joy. The work is not finished, it has merely changed. The land before him is quiet, but it is not yet his in the way history will later describe. For now, it is simply altered. For the English, the field becomes a place of ending. Those who leave it behind carry more than exhaustion. They carry the awareness that something familiar has slipped away. Roads that once led home now feel uncertain, and the future no longer resembles the past closely enough to be trusted. The loss is not only of a king, but of continuity, of a way of being shaped over centuries. Even in retreat, there is restraint, a quiet dignity in survival, as though the land itself urges them to remember who they were. As night deepens, the field continues to empty, returning gradually to stillness. Insects move through the grass, wind passes gently over disturbed earth, and the sky resumes its patient watching. What has occurred here will soon be spoken of, stitched into memory, carried forward in story and song. But for this moment, there is only quiet. The day has ended, the field has spoken, and history, having taken its step forward, rests once more in silence. Night fully claims the field as darkness settles into every hollow and fold of the land, smoothing over what the day has torn apart. The sky holds steady above, stars emerging slowly, indifferent to what has been decided below. The air cools, carrying away the last traces of heat left behind by movement and struggle. In this deeper quiet, the field feels larger again, its boundaries softened by shadow. What remains is not silence alone, but a sense of pause, as though the world itself is taking time to absorb what has changed before allowing the future to continue. Among the Norman forces, the work of consolidation begins carefully. Tents are raised where possible, fires tended with restraint, and watches set with disciplined calm. Men move with the quiet efficiency of those who understand that vigilance now matters as much as strength did before. There is relief, but it is measured, held in check by responsibility. Victory has delivered opportunity, not rest. William's presence remains steady, guiding without excess. He listens more than he speaks, already aware that the battle's meaning will not be shaped by noise, but by what follows in the days and years ahead.
For those English who remain near the field, the night carries a different weight. Some hide among the trees, listening for sounds that might signal pursuit. Others move carefully along familiar paths, guided more by instinct than sight. The land they have known all their lives feels altered, not in shape, but in certainty. Every shadow seems deeper, every sound more pronounced. Yet within this fear, there is also memory. They remember who they were before this day, and that memory becomes something they carry forward even as the world around them begins to shift. The fallen lie where they are, returned to the earth without distinction. Rank and name dissolve here, replaced by stillness. The ground accepts them quietly, the ground closing gently around what it has received. Wind passes over them without pause, and the sky offers no commentary. This moment, unobserved by most, is where history becomes human. Beyond banners and claims, it is here that the cost of change settles most deeply, felt not in triumph or loss, but in the simple finality of rest. As the hours move on, the field continues its slow return to quiet continuity. Grass bends, insects resume their careful paths, and the land begins the long process of forgetting, even as people remember. What happened here will shape laws, languages, and lives yet to come. But tonight, the weight of what remains is carried gently, held between earth and sky. In this stillness, let the moment rest, reminding us that every great turning leaves behind not only a new beginning, but a silence where the past quietly comes to an end. With the coming of the next day, the land awakens cautiously, as though uncertain how to greet the morning after such change. Light spreads slowly across hills and valleys that appear unchanged at first glance, yet feel subtly unfamiliar. Paths are walked again, but with different weight upon them. The air carries a quiet tension, not of battle, but of adjustment. What has occurred cannot be undone, yet it has not fully settled into understanding. England moves forward carefully, sensing that something essential has crossed from one state of being into another, though its shape is not yet fully visible. William's progress through the countryside is deliberate and restrained. He does not rush toward London, nor does he press his advantage with unnecessary force. Instead, he advances with measured authority, allowing news of Hastings to travel ahead of him. Towns and villages respond not with resistance, but with observation. Doors remain closed, then slowly open. People watch from a distance, weighing presence against rumor. William understands that conquest is secured not only by victory on the field, but by acceptance afterward. His movements are designed to suggest inevitability rather than threat, patience rather than domination. Among the English nobility, uncertainty takes root. Councils gather quietly, voices lowered, decisions weighed with care. The loss of Harold leaves a space not easily filled, and the familiar structures of power feel suddenly fragile. Loyalties that once felt clear now require reconsideration. Some cling to tradition, others to survival. The question is no longer who should rule, but how England will endure what has come. In these quiet discussions, the future begins to take shape, shaped as much by fear as by hope. As William approaches London, resistance softens into negotiation. The city itself stands as it always has, walls steady, streets unchanged, yet its meaning shifts with each passing hour. When William is finally acknowledged, it is not through spectacle alone, but through ceremony carefully constructed to suggest continuity, even in change. A crown passes from one tradition to another, not erased, but transformed. The act is both ending and beginning, carrying the weight of centuries while opening the door to something unfamiliar. This moment, more than the clash at Hastings, marks the true turning. The crossing of the crown signals not merely a new ruler, but a reordering of the world beneath it. England does not disappear, nor does it remain the same. It becomes something layered, shaped by old roots and new stone. Let this passage rest quietly with you, this careful transition where power moves without noise, reminding us that history often changes most profoundly, not in battle, but in the calm that follows.
In the months that follow, the land begins to change in ways that feel gradual at first, almost gentle in their arrival. Life resumes its familiar rhythms, yet beneath them, something new takes hold. Villages continue to wake with the sun, fields are worked as they always have been, and roads carry travelers from one place to another. But now, alongside the old patterns, new structures begin to appear. Where wooden halls once stood as symbols of authority and gathering, foundations of stone are laid with quiet determination. The sound of chisels and hammers joins the countryside, steady and persistent, shaping a future that will not fade as easily as wood and earth. These stone castles rise not merely as defenses, but as statements. They sit upon hills and near rivers, placed carefully to command both land and movement. Their walls grow slowly, layer by layer, each block fitted with intention. To those who watch them rise, they inspire mixed feelings. Some see protection, a promise of order in uncertain times. Others feel the weight of permanence, sensing that what is being built is meant to last beyond a single lifetime. William understands this symbolism well. Stone does not ask permission, it endures. Through it, authority becomes visible, undeniable, and woven into the landscape itself. For the English people, adaptation becomes a quiet necessity. Old customs remain, but they are now practiced beneath new oversight. Language begins to shift in subtle ways, as Norman words find their place alongside familiar speech. Laws are recorded, land is measured, and obligations are redefined. The world does not change overnight. Instead, it layers itself, old and new resting together, sometimes uneasily. There is loss here, but also continuity. Families remain tied to their fields, seasons continue their cycle, and memory persists even as power rearranges itself above. The Norman rulers, for their part, learn the land they now govern. They study its paths, its harvests, its people. Administration replaces warfare as the daily work of conquest. Decisions are made not with swords, but with seals and records. This quieter phase carries its own tension, requiring patience and restraint. Authority must be maintained without constant force. In this balance between control and coexistence, the foundations of feudal England take shape, defined as much by obligation as by protection. As stone replaces wood across the land, England settles into a new identity. The castles stand as reminders of change, their shadows stretching long across fields that remember older ways. Yet within those shadows, life continues. Children grow, stories are told, and the past is carried forward even as the future rises in stone. Let this transformation rest gently with you, this slow reshaping of a world, reminding us that history often moves not through sudden breaks, but through quiet rebuilding, one enduring layer at a time. As seasons turn and years begin to place gentle distance between the battle and the present, England settles into patterns that feel unfamiliar yet increasingly unavoidable. The land itself appears unchanged to the untrained eye, still shaped by rivers, fields, and winding roads. But beneath this surface, the structure of life is being carefully rewoven. Relationships between people and power are redefined, not through loud decree, but through daily practice. Obligations are named, measured, and recorded, binding communities together in new ways. The world grows more ordered, more structured, as though the chaos of change is slowly being drawn into lines that can be followed and understood. The Norman system of feudal bonds spreads quietly across the countryside.
Lords are appointed, lands granted, and responsibilities assigned with precision. In return for protection and favor, service is expected, formalized, and enforced. This arrangement brings a sense of predictability, even as it limits freedom. For some, it offers stability where uncertainty once ruled. For others, it tightens boundaries that had previously been flexible. Yet most accept it not out of enthusiasm, but necessity. Life continues, shaped by agreements that feel distant in origin, but immediate in effect, guiding how work is done and loyalty expressed. Castles become more than symbols as they integrate into everyday life. Their walls define not only defense, but administration. Markets gather near their gates, roads bend to meet them, and authority flows outward from their presence. They serve as places where disputes are settled, taxes collected, and justice declared. To many, these structures feel imposing, yet familiar with time. Stone that once seemed foreign becomes part of the landscape, its permanence slowly absorbed into the rhythm of daily existence. Language itself begins to shift in subtle, lasting ways. Norman French and Old English intermingle, shaping speech that reflects layered identity. Words for power, law, and culture take on new forms, while older expressions persist in homes and fields. This blending happens without ceremony, carried by conversation rather than command. Over time, it produces a language that belongs fully to neither origin, yet draws strength from both. In this quiet evolution, the story of conquest continues, not through force, but through voice and habit. As these threads tighten into a new order, England finds itself transformed not by erasure, but by accumulation. The past remains present, even as the future asserts itself more clearly. What began with ships crossing water now lives in stone, speech, and structure. Let this moment rest with you, this gentle weaving of change into continuity, reminding us that history often endures not in dramatic moments alone, but in the steady patterns that shape how people live, speak, and belong. As years pass and the sharp edges of conquest soften, memory begins to seek a form that can endure beyond spoken story. Battles fade in detail, names blur, and moments once vivid settle into impression rather than fact. Yet there remains a need to remember, to hold the shape of what occurred in a way that can be seen as well as told. In Normandy, careful hands begin a task that feels both humble and ambitious, the stitching of history into cloth. Thread by thread, a long fabric takes shape, not hurried, not adorned with excess, but patient, as though aware that what it carries must last. The Bayeux Tapestry unfolds as a quiet witness to the past. Scenes appear one after another, flowing without interruption, much like memory itself. Ships cross the sea, horses move across fields, figures stand, march, fall. There is no single moment given dominance. Instead, the story moves steadily forward, allowing each action its place without judgment. Faces are simple, gestures restrained, yet meaning gathers in the sequence. The tapestry does not shout of victory or lament loss, it observes. In doing so, it preserves not only events, but the way people once understood them. What makes this work remarkable is not its precision, but its humanity. The figures are not distant heroes carved in stone, they are men in motion, caught in moments of effort and uncertainty. There is room for humor, for irony, even for quiet acknowledgement of fear. Animals wander through scenes, borders carry small, curious details, and everyday life slips in alongside grand events. The tapestry reminds those who view it that history is never only about kings and battles, it is also about the ordinary world that surrounds them, continuing even as power shifts. For England, the tapestry becomes a mirror held at a distance. It tells a story shaped by Norman hands, yet it cannot erase the deeper layers beneath. Those who see it recognize familiar land, familiar struggle, even if the telling feels altered. Memory, after all, is rarely neutral. It reflects the needs and understanding of those who preserve it. Still, within this woven account, there remains truth, not always in detail, but in spirit. The crossing, the clash, the change are all there, held together by thread. As the cloth is completed, it does not close the story. Instead, it carries it forward, inviting each new generation to look, to wonder, to remember. Let this image rest gently with you. History not as stone or sword, but as fabric, shaped slowly by patient hands. In its quiet endurance, the tapestry reminds us that even the greatest turning points are ultimately held together by the careful work of memory.
With time, the sharp boundary between conqueror and conquered begins to soften, not through forgetting, but through living together long enough for difference to become familiar. England, reshaped by Norman rule, does not remain frozen in the moment of its defeat. Instead, it learns itself again. The land continues to produce harvests, rivers follow their courses, and seasons return with dependable rhythm. Children are born who have never known an Anglo-Saxon king, and elders speak of the past with voices already touched by distance. Change, once disruptive, becomes the air in which daily life unfolds, present but no longer startling. The Norman rulers, once outsiders, grow rooted in English soil. Their children are raised among English fields, their concerns shaped less by Normandy than by the realities of the island they now govern. Administration deepens, law becomes more consistent, and the idea of the kingdom grows more unified than it had been before. What began as conquest turns gradually into stewardship, though not without tension. Authority remains firm, yet it adapts, learning when to press and when to allow tradition to persist. Power settles not as a single force, but as a layered presence, negotiated day by day. For the people of England, identity becomes something shared rather than singular. Old stories remain, told beside new ones. Saints, customs, and memories overlap, forming a culture richer for its complexity. Language continues its slow blending, creating expressions that carry echoes of both worlds. What once felt like loss transforms into inheritance, though unevenly and not without pain. Still, life insists on continuation. Work is done, families endure, and meaning is found not only in what was taken away, but in what remains and evolves. The landscape itself absorbs this merging quietly. Castles weather, villages grow around them, and paths worn by countless feet connect old places to new centers of power. The land does not resist change, nor does it forget entirely. It holds everything: conquest, adaptation, memory, without distinction. In this endurance, England becomes something more than the sum of its pasts, shaped by continuity as much as disruption. Let this moment rest with you, this long settling of a kingdom relearning itself. History here is no longer loud or urgent. It is patient, lived through ordinary days. And in that patience, the deepest transformations take hold, carried forward not by force, but by the quiet persistence of life itself. As decades pass, the events of 1666 begin to lose their sharpness, not because they are forgotten, but because time gently smooths their edges. What was once immediate becomes remembered, and what was once remembered becomes woven into a broader sense of origin. The battle at Hastings no longer feels like a wound, but like a distant turning point, referenced quietly rather than relived. Stories are told with less urgency now, shaped by reflection rather than grief or triumph. England continues forward, carrying its layered past not as a burden, but as a foundation upon which everyday life steadily unfolds. The institutions born from conquest grow familiar. Feudal bonds, once foreign, are now accepted as part of the natural order. Castles that once symbolized domination become landmarks of local identity, their walls weathered by seasons rather than fear. Laws evolve, shaped by precedent and compromise, reflecting a society that has learned to balance authority with custom. Even the memory of William himself shifts, transformed from conqueror into king, a figure placed within lineage rather than opposition. History, in this way, settles into narrative, arranged so it can be lived with rather than resisted. Among the people, the blending of cultures becomes less conscious. Norman and English influences coexist without constant acknowledgement, their differences absorbed into habit and routine. Language carries this union quietly, its words reflecting a past no longer contested, but inherited. Festivals are celebrated, work continues, and faith remains a steady presence, offering continuity across generations. The past is present, but it no longer demands attention. It simply exists, shaping the way things are done without needing to explain why. The land reflects this calm endurance. Fields that once witnessed conflict now bear crops, their soil turned gently rather than violently. Roads carry merchants, messengers, and travelers whose concerns lie in trade, news, and home rather than power. The countryside resumes its role as witness rather than participant, holding the memory of what occurred without insisting upon it. Nature does not choose sides, it simply continues, offering stability where human affairs once disrupted its balance. In this long quieting, the conquest finds its final form, not as a moment of victory or loss, but as a shared inheritance, held within the story of a people who endured change and made it their own. Let this understanding rest with you, this softening of history into memory. It reminds us that even the most defining moments eventually become part of the background of life, shaping who we are not through force, but through time. Night returns gently, much like it did on the eve of all that began this story, settling not only over the land, but over the long passage of time we have wandered together. The world feels quieter now, as though it has spoken all it needed to say and is content to let meaning linger rather than insist upon itself. The fields of Hastings no longer echo with movement or command. They exist simply as part of the earth, held within a landscape that has learned how to carry memory without strain. What once divided eras now rests comfortably among them, neither sharp nor demanding, only present. History, when viewed from a distance, reveals its true nature. It is not a series of loud moments, but a slow conversation between what was and what becomes. The Norman Conquest did not end England's story, nor did it replace it. Instead, it folded one world into another, shaping something that could not have existed without both. Stone castles rose, languages blended, laws evolved, and people lived on, rarely pausing to consider how deeply their lives were shaped by events long past. This is how history endures, not as spectacle, but as quiet influence, felt more than remembered. The Bayeux Tapestry still hangs, its threads holding the story in gentle suspension. It does not rush, nor does it explain itself. It invites patience, asking those who look upon it to move slowly, scene by scene, just as time itself does. In this way, it mirrors the nature of memory, which rarely arrives all at once. Instead, it reveals itself softly when the world is calm enough to listen. What we remember is not only what happened, but how it has continued to shape the spaces we inhabit.
England, shaped by centuries since that crossing of the Channel, no longer feels divided by that moment, yet it would not be the same without it. The past lives on in names, in stone, in words spoken without thought. It lives quietly, asking for no attention, yet offering depth to everything built upon it. This is the gift of time, not erasure, but balance. What once felt overwhelming becomes something we can rest beside, understanding without needing to relive. And now, as this story settles into its final stillness, you may let your thoughts drift, just as the centuries have. If these quiet journeys into the past have kept you company tonight, you are always welcome to return to Let Me Tell You, where history waits patiently to be remembered, softly and without hurry. For now, let the night hold you, let the story fade gently, and allow rest to come as easily as time itself.